Section 1. The day the road disappeared, the morning started like any other in our quiet rural neighborhood. A misty sunrise draping soft gold over the winding dirt roads, the hum of cicadas echoing through the trees, and that familiar scent of pine and damp earth filling the air. I'd planned on spending the day working on repairs for my cabin, maybe taking my old pickup out of town for supplies, but instead, I found myself standing slack-jawed at the foot of my long driveway, staring at what could only be described as a bizarre and infuriating act of sabotage. Karen Thompson, the self-proclaimed guardian of the community and unofficial head of the HOA, had erected a massive barricade across the narrow road leading to my property. It wasn't just a flimsy barrier, either. It was an actual wall of cinder blocks, wooden beams, and metal poles cemented together like some apocalyptic fortress. At the center stood a bright hand-painted sign in all caps: private access, no trespassing, HOA permission required. It was absurd, almost cartoonish, yet the sight of it sent a shockwave of anger through me. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience. This was the only road leading in or out of my property, my land, my driveway, my rights, and she had literally walled me off from the rest of the world overnight. I could feel my blood pressure rising as I scanned the scene, my truck trapped on my side of the barricade like some kind of prisoner. There were even flower pots strategically placed along the top, as if she decided to beautify her crime scene. My first thought was that this had to be a joke. Nobody would go this far over a simple dispute about road maintenance fees or HOA rules, right? But this was Karen we were talking about, a woman who had previously sent a 5-page letter demanding I repaint my mailbox because the shade of green clashed with the natural tones of the environment. This was a woman who once called animal control on my neighbor's golden retriever because it looked intimidating. No, this wasn't a prank. This was a full-blown declaration of war. I turned on my phone's camera and began documenting everything: the barricade, the sign, the way Karen was standing smugly at the top of the hill with her arms crossed like she had just accomplished something noble. She was dressed like she was going to war, too. Wide-brimmed hat, reflective safety vest, and even a clipboard in her hands. "Morning," she called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I see you've noticed the road improvements." My jaw tightened. Improvements? Karen, this is illegal. You've blocked a public access road. She clicked her tongue and held up her clipboard like a shield. Actually, this road falls under HOA jurisdiction, and since you've been neglecting your dues, we've taken the liberty of restricting access until you comply. Safety measures, you know? I took a deep breath, gripping my phone tighter, trying not to yell. Karen, I paid my dues last month, and this road is technically a shared easement. It's not HOA property. She smirked, that infuriating little smirk that told me she didn't care about facts or law. Well, you can take it up with the board. Until then, you'll just have to enjoy the peace and quiet. With that, she turned on her heel and marched off like a conquering general, leaving me fuming in the morning sunlight. I wasn't about to take this lying down. My first call was to the HOA office, but of course Karen's influence there was strong. The receptionist put me on hold for 10 minutes before giving me a vague answer. "We'll look into it and get back to you." That wasn't good enough. Next, I called the county zoning office, only to be told they'd review the complaint and respond in a few days. A few days? I couldn't even get my truck out of my own driveway. My frustration was mounting, my hands trembling with anger as I paced back and forth, glaring at that ridiculous barricade. Karen had finally crossed a line, and I knew if I didn't handle this quickly, she'd get even bolder. She'd probably try to find me next or send a letter claiming my shed violated some obscure code. No, this needed immediate action. I decided to walk over to my neighbor, old Mr. Jenkins, who had lived here longer than anyone and knew every inch of this land. When he saw the barricade, his weathered face turned red with fury. "She's lost her damn mind," he muttered, spitting into the dirt. "That road's been here since before the HOA even existed. It's county property, plain and simple. You should call the sheriff." My heart skipped. The sheriff. Of course. I'd been so caught up in Karen's theatrics that I'd forgotten the most straightforward option. Within minutes, I was on the phone with the county sheriff's office explaining the situation. The deputy I spoke to didn't even sound surprised. "This isn't the first complaint we've had about your HOA president," he said dryly. "We'll send someone out to take a look." 2 hours later, a white patrol SUV rolled up to the barricade, and out stepped Sheriff Daniels himself, a tall, broad-shouldered man with no-nonsense demeanor. He took one look at the wall, raised an eyebrow, and let out a low whistle. "Well, that's a new one," he said. Karen appeared almost instantly, striding over with her clipboard and her best fake smile. "Sheriff, so glad you're here. We're just making some safety improvements to ensure proper community access." "Ma'am," Daniels interrupted, his voice calm but firm, "did you build this wall?" "The HOA approved it," she said proudly. "It's completely within our rights." "No, it's not," Daniel said flatly. He pointed at the ground. "This road is a public right-of-way. Blocking it is illegal. You're going to have to remove this immediately." Karen's face twisted, the fake smile faltering. "I don't think you understand. This is private property." "Ma'am," Daniel said again, "I've worked in this county for 20 years. I know every square inch of this land. This road was recorded as a public easement back in 1975. You don't own it." Karen opened her mouth to argue again, but Daniels cut her off with a raised hand. "If this barricade isn't gone in 24 hours, I'll have county equipment out here to tear it down myself. And you'll be getting a citation for obstruction." Karen's composure cracked right there. Her cheeks flushed red, and she sputtered something about community safety before storming off in a huff, leaving Daniels and me standing by the wall. The sheriff turned to me with a sigh. "I'll be honest with you, son. I don't think she's going to take this down herself. I'll put in the paperwork with the county to get this thing removed tomorrow." Relief flooded through me. Finally, someone with authority was stepping in. I thanked him profusely, but Daniels just tipped his hat. "Don't thank me yet. Something tells me this ain't over." He was right, of course. This was just the beginning of what would become one of the wildest HOA showdowns our county had ever seen, a battle that would end with the roar of heavy machinery and Karen's reign of terror finally crumbling like the wall she built. Section 2. Karen doubles down. If I thought Sheriff Daniels' stern warning would be enough to scare Karen into compliance, I was sorely mistaken. By the next morning, instead of seeing a dismantled barricade, as I had hoped, I walked out of my cabin to discover that Karen had doubled down. Not only was the wall still standing, but she had fortified it overnight. She'd added more cinder blocks, installed a bright yellow steel gate right in the middle, and even mounted a heavy-duty padlock on it like she was guarding a fortress. To top it off, she plastered new signs along the barricade. "No entry without HOA approval, and trespassers will be prosecuted." I couldn't believe my eyes. This wasn't just stubbornness anymore. This was war. I grabbed my phone and immediately called Sheriff Daniels, who, unsurprisingly, was not impressed when I told him what had happened. "She did what?" he said, his voice laced with disbelief. "All right, I'm on my way." I paced back and forth as I waited for him, rage bubbling in my chest. I had been patient. I'd tried calling the HOA office again that morning, but the receptionist brushed me off, claiming Karen had full authority to make decisions on road use. Even when I explained the sheriff's ruling, they said, "We'll need that in writing." It was clear Karen had them all wrapped around her finger. This woman thought she could intimidate me into compliance, maybe even force me to sell my land or bow down to her ridiculous HOA rules. What she didn't know was that I had no intention of backing down. About 30 minutes later, I saw the familiar white SUV coming down the gravel road, kicking up a cloud of dust. Sheriff Daniels stepped out, sunglasses on, his expression grim. "All right," he said as he approached the barricade, hands on his hips. "She's really asking for trouble now." He gave the structure a once-over, tapping the new steel gate with his knuckles. "She's escalated this. So now it's not just a civil matter. This is criminal obstruction." Daniels radioed in, calling for backup and a county code enforcement officer. While he waited for them to arrive, Karen appeared again, this time marching down from her house with an air of triumph, holding a thick folder in her hands. "Sheriff," she said sweetly, "I see you're back to inspect our improvements. Daniels turned to her slowly, his voice calm but sharp. Ma'am, I told you yesterday this road is public right-of-way. You're committing a crime by blocking it. I'm giving you one last chance to take it down yourself. Karen scoffed and waved her folder like it was a shield. I have all the HOA bylaws here, Sheriff. This community voted for stricter road control. We're allowed to restrict access to outsiders, and frankly, some of the people coming through here are undesirable. She shot a pointed glare at me as she said that, and my fists clenched at my sides. Ma'am, Daniel said firmly, this man is not an outsider. He owns property here, and you don't have the authority to change county law. Karen smirked, tilting her chin defiantly. We'll see about that. I've spoken to our HOA lawyer, and if you try to take this wall down, we'll sue the county for harassment. The tension was thick in the air, like a storm was brewing. Daniels let out a slow breath and removed his sunglasses, locking eyes with Karen. Lady, you can sue whoever you want, but that wall's coming down today. You've left us no choice. Karen's face twisted in outrage, and she stormed off, shouting over her shoulder, You'll regret this. She disappeared into her house, slamming the door behind her so hard the windows rattled. Daniels shook his head and muttered, That woman's about to learn the hard way. By noon, backup had arrived, 2 more sheriff's vehicles and a county code enforcement truck. The officers gathered around the barricade, snapping photos, measuring distances, and writing up violation notices. The code enforcement officer, a grizzled man named Tom, confirmed what Daniels had said. This road's been a public easement for decades. She can't block it, can't gate it, can't even put those stupid flower pots here. This whole thing's illegal as sin. I couldn't help but smirk a little, finally feeling some justice on the horizon. But I knew Karen wasn't done yet. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, she reappeared, this time flanked by 2 men in matching polo shirts, the HOA's security team. I almost laughed out loud. They looked more like mall cops than security guards, each holding a clipboard and wearing a belt with a flashlight and a radio. Karen marched up to the officers with a self-righteous air. Sheriff, I demand that you leave this property immediately. You have no jurisdiction here. These men will escort you out. Daniels raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. Ma'am, you've got to be kidding me. Karen crossed her arms. This is a private community, and you're trespassing. Daniels pulled a folded map from his pocket and held it up. No, this is a county road. And right now, you're facing charges for obstruction, harassment, and illegal construction. You're the one trespassing. Karen's smug smile faltered, but she wasn't ready to back down. You can't just bring in heavy machinery and destroy community property, she snapped. Watch me, Daniel said flatly. I've already called in Public Works. They're sending a bulldozer to clear this mess. Karen's jaw dropped, her face turning a deep shade of red. A bulldozer? She shrieked. You can't do that. This is tyranny. Daniels didn't flinch. No, ma'am. This is the law. The tension hit a fever pitch as Karen stormed back to her house once again, screaming about lawsuits and calling the governor. I leaned against the hood of Daniel's SUV, shaking my head in disbelief. She's really unhinged, I muttered. Daniels nodded grimly. I've dealt with a lot of HOA disputes in my career, but she takes the cake. Don't worry, son. We'll get your road cleared today. While we waited for Public Works to arrive with the bulldozer, word spread quickly through the neighborhood. One by one, my neighbors started gathering around the barricade, whispering and pointing, clearly fed up with Karen's antics. Some of them had been intimidated by her for years, too scared to speak up. Now, seeing the sheriff take charge, they finally had courage. Old Mr. Jenkins showed up with a lawn chair and plopped it down on the side of the road like he was front row at a boxing match. I've been waiting 20 years for someone to put her in her place, he chuckled. A few other neighbors nodded in agreement, some even bringing out snacks as they waited for the show to start. It was like a community event the day Karen finally got what she deserved. By the time the bulldozer arrived, escorted by 2 more county trucks, there was a small crowd gathered, murmuring with anticipation. Karen, of course, re-emerged at that exact moment, now waving her phone around like a weapon. "You're all going to regret this," she screamed. "I'm recording everything. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Daniels just sighed and motioned to the bulldozer driver. "Take it down." The driver nodded and started up the massive machine, the low rumble of the engine filling the air. Karen's eyes went wide as the bulldozer lurched forward, its metal blade lowered like a battering ram. She ran in front of the barricade, arms outstretched. "Stop! You can't do this! I'll sue you all," she shrieked. Daniels calmly walked over to her, his towering figure casting a shadow over her. "Ma'am, step aside, or you'll be arrested for interfering with county operations." Karen's face twisted with fury, but something in his tone finally got through to her. She stomped her foot, let out a frustrated scream, and stormed back to her porch, slamming the door behind her. The bulldozer roared forward, and within minutes, the barricade was nothing more than a pile of rubble. The crowd cheered, clapping and hollering as the steel gate clattered to the ground. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, like a heavy weight had been lifted from my chest. For the first time in days, I could breathe easy knowing justice was finally served. But Karen wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Even as the dust settled and county workers swept the debris off the road, I could see her pacing in her window, phone pressed to her ear, probably plotting her next move. Something told me this was far from over, and Daniels seemed to sense it too. "She's not done yet," he muttered as he handed me a copy of the incident report. "People like her don't take losing well. Keep your eyes open, and call us if she so much as looks at this road again." I nodded, grateful for his support, but uneasy about what Karen might do next. As the bulldozer rolled away and the neighbors dispersed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was about to escalate things to a whole new level. Section 3, Karen's revenge plan, unfolds. I thought that after seeing a bulldozer demolish her illegal barricade, Karen would have finally learned her lesson. But I should have known better. People like her don't just back down, they regroup, scheme, and come back twice as aggressive. The next few days felt deceptively calm, almost like the eye of a storm. I'd drive down the now-cleared road, half expecting her to jump out from behind a tree with a clipboard and a megaphone, but instead, her property was eerily quiet. No angry yelling, no new signs, not even the HOA security clowns patrolling around. For a moment, I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, the sheriff's intervention had been enough to scare her straight. That hope was crushed on the fourth morning when I opened my mailbox and found it stuffed with thick envelopes. Inside were formal HOA violation notices, all citing ridiculous reasons for fines. According to Karen, I had committed over a dozen infractions ranging from unsightly landscaping to parking violations for having my own truck in my own driveway. Each violation carried a hefty fine, and she'd even stapled a payment demand letter on top, giving me 2 weeks to pay or face further consequences. I couldn't help but laugh at the sheer audacity of it, but beneath that laughter was simmering anger. Karen wasn't just mad about the bulldozer, she was trying to hit me where it hurt, my wallet. I called the HOA office immediately, demanding to speak to someone in charge, but unsurprisingly, they were in a meeting. The receptionist sheepishly admitted that Karen was the HOA president and that she was the one who had issued the violations. "Sir," she said nervously, "I'm sorry, but Mrs. Thompson is within her rights to issue citations." I almost laughed out loud. Her rights? She just got a county bulldozer sent to her front yard because she tried to block a public road. She doesn't have the authority to fine me for breathing on my own property. The receptionist lowered her voice. "I know, but she runs the board. Nobody ever challenges her." That last line told me everything I needed to know. Karen didn't just lead the HOA, she ruled it like a tyrant. She was used to everyone bowing to her, and I was the first person in years who had stood up to her. Now, she was determined to make me pay. That afternoon, I started getting calls from neighbors. Some of them were supportive, thanking me for finally standing up to Karen. Others, though, seemed nervous. One elderly woman whispered into the phone, "She's telling people you're dangerous. She's saying you threatened her life, and that's why she put up that wall." I was stunned. Not only was she trying to financially punish me, but now she was spinning an entire narrative to turn the neighborhood against me. And it was working. I started noticing suspicious glances when I drove by. A few families who used to wave at me now avoided eye contact. Karen had been poisoning the well. The next day, things escalated even further. I woke up to the sound of loud voices outside. When I peeked out the window, I saw two HOA security officers standing on my property, clipboard in hand, measuring the width of my driveway like they were preparing to condemn it. I stormed outside. "What do you think you're doing?" I barked. One of them, a lanky guy with a patchy beard, cleared his throat nervously. Uh, Mrs. Thompson sent us to document violations. I laughed bitterly. Violations? This is MY property. You have 10 seconds to get off it before I call the sheriff. They exchanged uneasy glances but didn't move. "Sir, we're just following orders," the other one said. "We're allowed to conduct inspections." That was the last straw. I grabbed my phone, called Sheriff Daniels, and put him on speaker. "Sheriff," I said loudly, glaring at the so-called security guards, "I've got 2 trespassers on my property claiming Karen sent them." Daniels' voice came through the line, calm but firm. "They need to leave. Right now. Put me on with one of them." The lanky guy hesitated, but eventually took the phone. Whatever Daniels said to him must have hit hard, because both men backed off instantly, mumbling apologies as they scrambled back to their HOA-branded golf cart. I thought that might slow Karen down, but I underestimated her vindictiveness. That evening, I came home to find a county inspector waiting for me in my driveway. Apparently, someone had filed a series of complaints against my cabin, claiming it was structurally unsafe, a hazard to the community, and not up to code. It was obvious who had made the calls. The inspector, a reasonable man named George, quickly realized the complaints were bogus. "Honestly," he said, looking around my well-kept property, "I've been working this county for 15 years, and I've never seen anything so petty." He shook his head and chuckled. "Sounds like you've made an enemy." I sighed. "You have no idea." George promised to file a report stating that everything was in perfect condition, but the incident still rattled me. Karen was throwing everything she could at me, hoping something would stick. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, staring out into the darkness, thinking about my next move. Karen wasn't just being difficult, she was waging a full-scale campaign to intimidate me. If I didn't fight back, she'd run me out of my own property. That thought made my blood boil. This was MY land, and no power-hungry HOA president was going to bully me off it. I decided it was time to go on the offensive. The next morning, I drove straight to the county courthouse and filed an official harassment complaint against Karen. Sheriff Daniels met me there, looking both amused and exasperated. I knew she'd caused trouble, but this? She's really going for broke, he said. Together, we went over all the bogus citations, the trespassing incident, and the false reports. Daniels assured me that the sheriff's department was documenting everything. If she keeps this up, we'll have grounds to bring her in, he said. That gave me some hope, but I knew Karen wouldn't back down easily. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a drive through the neighborhood to clear my head. As I passed Karen's house, I noticed a group of people gathered in her driveway, all wearing HOA badges. It looked like some sort of emergency board meeting. Karen stood at the center, waving papers around like a dictator rallying her troops. I slowed down just enough to catch a few words, and what I heard made my blood run cold. "We'll file for an injunction. We'll get the county to revoke his property access. If the sheriff thinks he can bully us, we'll take this all the way to the state level." That was it. Karen wasn't just harassing me anymore. She was plotting to cut off my legal right to use the road altogether. My heart pounded in my chest as I drove away. This wasn't just some petty neighborhood feud anymore. This woman was willing to weaponize the entire HOA, possibly even courts, to crush me. When I got home, I started digging through my property records. I spent hours going through old deeds, plats, and county maps, and what I found was both shocking and empowering. The road Karen had tried to block wasn't just a county easement, it was legally protected under state law as a public thoroughfare. Not only that, but decades ago, the county had designated it as a fire access route, meaning that anyone obstructing it could face serious criminal charges. That was the leverage I needed. The next morning, I invited Sheriff Daniels and a county attorney out to my property. I showed them the records, and Daniels' eyes lit up. "This changes everything," he said. "If she tries this again, she won't just be facing fines. She'll be looking at jail time." The attorney nodded. "We can file an injunction against her instead. Turn the tables." Hearing that gave me a sense of vindication I hadn't felt since this whole mess started. But even with that reassurance, I knew Karen wasn't going to stop until she was forced to. And sure enough, 2 nights later, I woke up to the sound of hammering. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but when I peeked out my window, I saw something that made my blood boil. Karen and 2 of her HOA cronies were out there in the dead of night, hammering wooden stakes into the ground and stringing up yellow caution tape across the road. She was trying to rebuild her blockade. At 2 a.m., that was the last straw. I grabbed my phone, called Daniels, and whispered, "She's at it again." Within 15 minutes, 2 sheriff's cruisers came roaring up the road, lights flashing. Karen and her goons froze like deer in headlights as the officers jumped out. Daniels wasn't playing around this time. "You're under arrest," he barked at Karen. She shrieked in outrage, screaming about her rights and property values, but the deputies handcuffed her anyway. Her cronies scattered, running back to their homes like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Watching Karen get hauled away in the back of a police cruiser was one of the most satisfying moments of my life, but I knew this wasn't the end. People like her don't just give up. If anything, this arrest would probably make her even more determined to fight. But I also knew I wasn't alone anymore. The law was on my side. My neighbors were starting to see her for who she really was, and I wasn't afraid of her anymore. The road was quiet again after that, but I could feel the tension hanging in the air. Karen might have been in custody, but she'd be back soon enough, and when she returned, I had no doubt she'd come out swinging. I just didn't realize then how far she'd go, or that the next showdown would make the bulldozer incident look like child's play. Section 4, "The Neighborhood Divides and the War Escalates Karen's Arrest," was supposed to be the end of this nightmare. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. People like her don't take accountability, they take revenge. And when she got released a few days later, she returned with the kind of fury that could make a hornet look friendly. I first saw her that Monday morning, standing in her driveway like a queen surveying her kingdom, arms crossed, sunglasses on, whispering to a group of HOA board members huddled around her like loyal knights. She didn't even look embarrassed about getting hauled away in handcuffs. No, Karen was angry, and worse, she was plotting. By noon, I started noticing subtle signs of her comeback. A fresh batch of HOA newsletters had been stuffed in every mailbox on the street, each one with a dramatic headline splashed across the top: "Dangerous property owner threatens neighborhood safety." My jaw dropped as I skimmed through it. Karen had twisted the entire bulldozer incident, claiming that I had threatened her safety, that the sheriff's department had overstepped its authority, and that she was now working with county officials to protect the neighborhood from hostile individuals. She even called me a reckless landowner and claimed that my cabin was an eyesore and a hazard. What stunned me most was how convincing the letter sounded. She sprinkled in just enough half-truths to make her narrative seem plausible. And it was working. That evening, I caught a neighbor I'd always gotten along with staring at me suspiciously as I walked my dog. I waved, but she quickly turned away. A few hours later, I overheard 2 men talking outside, one of them muttering, "I heard he threatened her with a gun." I didn't even own a gun. That's when it hit me. Karen wasn't just targeting me with fines and fake citations anymore. She was running a full-blown smear campaign. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting to confront her directly. When I showed up, the room fell silent. The board members, all sitting behind a long table like courtroom judges, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Karen, of course, sat in the middle, a smug smile plastered on her face. Well, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "The man of the hour has arrived. I'm here to clear up the lies you've been spreading," I said firmly. Karen leaned back in her chair. "Lies? Oh, sweetheart, everything I wrote is true. You threatened me. You endangered this neighborhood. You've been a nuisance since the day you bought that property." My blood boiled. "You mean since the day I refused to let you illegally block a public road?" That comment caused a ripple of whispers across the room. Some of the board members glanced at each other nervously. One even looked like he wanted to speak up, but thought better of it. Karen slammed her gavel on the table. "Order. This man is out of control. We've already voted on an emergency resolution to restrict his access to community facilities and roads." I almost laughed out loud. "Restrict my access? That road is county-owned. You can't restrict me from using it." Karen smirked. "Oh, we'll see about that. I've already filed for a court injunction." That was my breaking point. I pulled out a stack of papers from my bag, the property records I dug up, the ones proving the road was a state-protected fire access route. I laid them on the table. "You're not just wrong, Karen. You're breaking the law. If you keep this up, you won't just be facing fines, you'll be facing prison time." The room erupted in murmurs. For the first time, Karen's confident smirk faltered. She glanced down at the documents, then quickly regained her composure. "This meeting is over," she snapped, slamming her gavel again. As I walked out, several neighbors approached me, quietly, whispering their support. One older man shook my hand. "Thank you," he said softly. Someone needed to put her in her place. That gave me hope. But Karen wasn't done. The next week was pure chaos. Karen doubled down on her smear campaign. HOA patrol cars began circling my property day and night, flashing their lights into my windows. Someone spray-painted "Go home" on my mailbox. Another day, I found a pile of trash dumped in my driveway. It was clear Karen had rallied her most loyal supporters, turning them into her personal army. But not everyone was on her side. More neighbors began approaching me in private, sharing stories of Karen's bullying tactics. One woman confessed that Karen had fined her $500 for hanging wind chimes on her porch. Another man said she'd threatened to foreclose on his home because his grass was too tall. People had been living in fear of her for years, and now they saw that I was the first person willing to fight back. Slowly but surely, I was winning allies. Sheriff Daniels stopped by regularly to check on me. "We're building a case," he said. "We've got her on trespassing, false reports, and harassment. If she keeps pushing, she's going to dig her own grave." And push she did. One night, I woke up to a loud bang. I grabbed a flashlight and ran outside, only to find Karen and two of her cronies setting up metal gates across the road. These weren't flimsy caution tapes or wooden stakes. These were heavy-duty steel barricades, welded together and padlocked. It was clear she had spent serious money on this. "Karen," I yelled, "what the hell do you think you're doing?" She spun around, flashlight in hand, her face twisted with rage. "You don't belong here. This is MY community. You're a danger to us all, and I won't let you ruin this neighborhood." Before I could respond, she pulled out a stack of papers and waved them in my face. "Court order," she barked. But I could tell from a glance that it was just another bogus HOA resolution. "Karen, this is illegal." I shouted, "You can't just build gates across a county road." She sneered, "Watch me." That's when I called Daniels again. Within 30 minutes, sheriff's deputies were on the scene. But this time, Karen didn't back down. She stood in front of the gates, arms crossed, daring them to arrest her. "This is my neighborhood," she screamed as deputies approached. "You can't just let criminals take over." Daniels was calm but firm. "Karen, step aside. You are obstructing a public roadway." "I'm protecting it," she shrieked. Last warning, Daniels said, "Move." She didn't move. That's when Daniels gave the order. Moments later, a county truck rolled up, towing a small bulldozer, the same one from before. Karen's face turned pale. "No, you can't do this. This is private property," she screamed, but it was too late. The bulldozer roared to life, and within minutes, the gates she'd spent thousands of dollars on were nothing but twisted metal. Karen completely lost it. She started screaming at the deputies, calling them corrupt, threatening lawsuits, even throwing her shoes at the bulldozer. That was enough for Daniels. "You're under arrest," he said, motioning for the deputies to cuff her again. As they hauled her away for the second time, I noticed a crowd of neighbors had gathered, watching the scene unfold. Some were whispering in shock, but others were openly cheering. One man clapped loudly and shouted, "About time!" That was the turning point. Karen's iron grip on the neighborhood was finally cracking. Over the next few days, I worked with Daniels and the county attorney to file an official restraining order against her. We also pushed for a special HOA election to remove her from her position as president. At first, the board resisted. But once the video of her screaming at deputies and throwing her shoes went viral on social media, thanks to a quick-thinking neighbor with a smartphone, public opinion shifted fast. Within a week, Karen was officially voted out of office. The new HOA president, a soft-spoken man named Robert, personally came to my property to apologize. "We let her get away with too much for too long," he admitted. "Thank you for standing up to her." Karen, of course, didn't take her downfall gracefully. Rumor had it she moved out of the neighborhood a month later, selling her house at a huge loss. Some said she was fighting legal battles over the harassment charges. Others claimed she was trying to start fresh somewhere else. Honestly, I didn't care. All I knew was that peace had finally returned. The road was open again, the barricades were gone, and for the first time in months, I could sit on my porch without looking over my shoulder. But I'd learned an important lesson. Sometimes, standing up to a bully isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about giving others the courage to do the same. And as for Karen, well, I hear she's still telling people I ruined her life. But if ruining her life means stopping her from terrorizing an entire community, I'll take that as a compliment. Section 5, Karen's final downfall. You'd think Karen would have learned her lesson after being hauled away in handcuffs twice, but people like her don't change overnight. Even after she was voted out of the HOA, she kept trying to stir up drama from the sidelines. Rumors circulated that she was building her case against me and the sheriff's department, claiming she had undeniable proof that we'd violated her rights. Most of the neighbors rolled their eyes, but I knew better than to underestimate her. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail, a notice of a lawsuit. Karen was suing me, the sheriff's department, and even the county itself for property damage, referring to her demolished gates, emotional distress, and my favorite, neighborhood sabotage. I couldn't help but laugh when I read it. The nerve of this woman was astounding. Sheriff Daniels wasn't amused, though. "Don't worry about it," he said when I showed him the papers. "She's got no case. If anything, this will just make it easier to bury her legally." And he was right. Karen showed up to court looking like she'd stepped out of a reality show, bright red suit, oversized sunglasses, and a binder full of evidence. She strutted in as if she owned the courtroom, but the judge wasn't impressed. When it was my attorney's turn to present evidence, we laid everything out in meticulous detail, county records proving the road she'd blocked was public property, videos of her screaming at deputies and throwing her shoes during the bulldozer incident, witness statements from neighbors describing years of harassment, illegal fines, and bullying, HOA financial records that revealed she'd misused community funds to pay for those barricades. By the time we were done, Karen's face had gone from smug to pale. She tried to defend herself, but every word out of her mouth made things worse. She accused the judge of being biased and claimed the sheriff's department was out to get her. The judge finally slammed his gavel and said, "Mrs. Miller, if you don't stop interrupting, I'll hold you in contempt." When the verdict came, it was brutal. Not only was Karen's lawsuit thrown out, but the judge ordered her to pay damages for harassment, trespassing, and obstruction of a public roadway. She was also ordered to reimburse the HOA for misused funds and cover all legal fees, mine included. The total bill? Nearly $75,000. The courtroom erupted in whispers as Karen's jaw dropped. She begged for leniency, claiming she didn't have the money. The judge didn't care. "You created this mess, Mrs. Miller. Now you're going to clean it up." The fallout was swift. Within a month, Karen's house went up for sale. I heard from a neighbor that she had no choice. She couldn't afford the fines or the legal costs. The for sale sign out front felt like a victory flag for the entire community. People who had been living in fear for years finally felt free. A week before she moved out, I happened to see her one last time. She was standing on her porch, glaring at me as I walked past. Her once proud demeanor was gone. She looked tired, defeated. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the stress, the harassment, and the months of chaos she'd caused. I gave her a polite nod and kept walking. She didn't say a word. After Karen left, life in the neighborhood transformed. The new HOA president, Robert, was fair and reasonable. The constant patrol cars disappeared. People started hosting block parties, kids played outside again, and for the first time in a long while there was peace. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching the sunset over the now open road, Sheriff Daniel stopped by. He leaned against his truck and grinned. "You know, I've been doing this job for 20 years, he said, and I've never seen a community rally together like this. You didn't just stand up to her. You gave everyone else the courage to do the same." I smiled. Guess she finally met someone she couldn't bully. He chuckled. "That's one way to put it." Karen's name eventually became a cautionary tale. Whenever a new family moved in, someone would inevitably point at her old house and say, "You wouldn't believe the woman who used to live there." People shared stories of her antics like legends. The fines for having a welcome mat, the demands to repaint houses because she didn't like the color, and of course, the infamous bulldozer incident. For me, it was a reminder that bullies only thrive when people let them. And sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to back down to bring an entire system crashing down. As I locked my gate that night, I glanced down the quiet, peaceful road. The same road she had once tried to claim as her own. The streetlights glowed softly, and in the distance, kids were laughing and riding their bikes. The neighborhood was finally free. Karen was gone, but her legacy lived on, not as a feared HOA president, but as the cautionary tale of the woman who tried to take on the sheriff, the law, and the truth and lost everything.